Margaret, I wish we could channel some of that anger and passion into facing the existential threat that climate change poses, and I think that's the challenge for all of us. I want to say that I welcome the opportunity provided by Sinn Féin to take part in this debate, and I support the motion. I take grave exception to a TD from the Labour Party telling us that anyone that's opposed to a carbon tax is not serious about climate change. That type of divisive comment is unacceptable. Since my election in February 16, I would say it is outside of health and housing the topic I've spoken on the most. I have stood up repeatedly with a small number of colleagues and appealed to the government to recognise the crisis posed by climate change and to declare an emergency. That was finally declared on the 9th of May 2019. I'd like to say it was as a result of the pressure from ourselves, but finally it was as a result of the children standing out of the door appealing to all of us to do something, and along with all of the reports from the various organisations telling us that there was no turning back. Indeed, the Minister for Finance, or Public Expenditure and Reform, I can't remember which, told us that our planet is burning, and I fully agree. What I don't agree with it is a divisive carbon tax, and it's absolutely divisive. And the ESRI told us back in 2000, and we like to quote them on different topics. Indeed, I'll be quoting them later tonight in relation to finance questions. A working paper as far back as 2008 told us a carbon tax in Ireland will not stop climate change. Indeed, it is unlikely to have a measurable direct impact on global warming. A global tax is important because it signals Ireland's commitment to international climate policy. So we're talking about signalling as opposed to having an impact. I disagree with the ESRI in what they're saying in relation to signalling. I feel there are far more effective ways to signal to our companions in other countries that we're taking climate change desperately seriously. And so if we look at this now and we say, I quote Professor John Sweeney, who has been extremely outspoken. I should say he's on the side of a carbon tax. But what he said was, politicians feel comfortable talking about taxes rather than more fundamental social and economic change. And that is exactly what we're happening here. We're being diverted, not by Sinn Féin's motion, but by the government policy generally, talking about carbon tax, those for and against, as opposed to a proper analysis of how do we bring people together, like we did in the beginning of COVID, and then rapidly lost that solidarity. How do we do that? And as a small country, I think we're very well placed to put ourselves forward, to aspire and work towards a green country. Galway City, for example, should be picked as a pilot project to roll out a green, thriving city, at the very least to do a feasibility study on light rail, and to roll out public transport, park and ride, and lift the traffic off the road. What we're doing, of course, is the complete opposite. We have looked for a policy, for example, sustainable industry with seaweed, with wool from sheep. Nothing has ever happened. And let's look at the period since 2015, when we brought in the Climate Action Plan. What happened after that? Each year our emissions have gone up. That tells you a lot about our sincerity, doesn't it? And we zone in on a divisive carbon tax while the emissions go up. Then we brought in a national mitigation plan, and Friends of the Environment had to go forward to the Supreme Court, and they got it quashed. Why? It was unlawful. The mitigation plan was unlawful as against our obligations under the 2015 plan. And so all of the energy went into that, as opposed to joining forces to deal in a sustainable way with our climate action. And let's go local again. Let's look at the very good idea of decarbonisation plans. And Galway City Council, amongst other local authorities, have put forward their plan from April last year. It now sits in the Department of Housing, and they can't do anything about it, they told us in replies to questions, because then we need guidelines from the Department of the Environment. Now, so much for joined up thinking. So the decarbonation plan, before the thing since April last year, no thing on it. And then we have a circular that tells us we'd only look at towns above 5,000, for example, and sort of exclusive guidelines that prevent the community being involved. I'll stop on time, but I would dearly love to engage on this matter.